Empire.
The Commanders are building a wall in front of Jaden Daniels. Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Connelly Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com, have analysis of every Commanders pick this weekend, including the one they just made on Thursday night. And I'm talking to you, it's Friday morning, pretty early, so this will come out Friday morning. Anyways, they, of course, selected Josh Connelly, the tackle from Oregon. Now, he could be a guard as well. So going to talk a lot about Connelly right now, but just a couple things before I get into the pick and why I think this is a really good pick and what some of the why I think it's a smart pick as well, just to build that wall in front of Daniels. But a couple things before we get there. Again, you can check out my work on ESPN.com. All weekend, we're going to have updates on every pick in the NFL. So it's one-stop shopping. You want to find out about any pick from any team, you go to ESPN.com. And I will be back after every day. I will have a wrap-up of the day, tell you about the picks, looking ahead to the next day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we'll wrap up all these picks next week to get you more informed about the guys that Washington picked and just bring you some people in who can give some insight into them and analyze these picks as well. So anyway, stay tuned for all that. And by the way, I'm going to say this again, so I got some attention now for you. Hopefully have more people tuning in for this. So this has become very personal for me. Folks, guys, ask your physician about getting a test for prostate cancer. Ask them about the PSA. Talk to your physician about that. It's very important. And I'm just going to say that. So if a handful of you guys go and talk to your doctor, get a PSA, that would mean quite a bit, because I think that's something that could help everybody. And I think it's important to get tested, or at least have the discussion with your physician. Anyways, let's go on to the football side and Josh Connelly. So I like this pick, and I'm going to tell you why, for a lot of reasons here. And I think it starts with the fact that Connelly's an athletic player, and this fits with what they want to do. Get those guard tackle pulls, you get them blocking out on the screens, you want them blocking in space. This is what they wanted. So I like it from that perspective. He's got experience. He started left tackle the last 2 years for Oregon, third team All-American for the Associated Press. And it sets up the O-line now and for the next 4 to 5 years, where you can look at this line and say, that's one of the top groups in the NFL. Now, right now, we're just talking about potential for this group, because Brandon Coleman's got to go out and play very well wherever he goes. Connelly's got to come in and play very well at whichever spot he's at. But the potential is there to have a group that forms the core for this offense for the next several years in front of Jaden Daniels. Just look to Philly to see what a top offensive line can do for a team, for an offense, for a quarterback. You know, as good as Saquon Barkley is, he wasn't this good in New York behind that group. So if this works, you have the foundation for your offense set with that line, with Jaden Daniels. You can start to fill in the pieces beyond that. But let's take a look at this for Daniels, man. Well, I'll get into all that in a second, but looking at the pick right now, so there were several other guys on the board that would have been tempting because they play positions where we all feel like they would like to address: defensive end, cornerback. Maxwell Harrison, the guy that I picked in our mock draft, was still sitting there. He went one pick later to Buffalo. I do know they liked him, but this is a guy. Connelly was, as Adam Peters said, simply the top guy on their board. And so they weren't, and he even said, like, they had offers to move up. They weren't going to trade it if Connelly was on the board. And I think you saw on social media, they posted a picture of Adam Peters holding up a note that Cliff Kingsbury had left for him saying, "I stopped by, take the tackle from Oregon." So that was, I think, earlier in the day, or earlier in the week, rather. And so, like, this is the guy that they have liked. And I had talked about him a little bit. I didn't know if they would take him in the first round. Clearly, they liked him enough to do so. And it does sound like there were a couple of teams higher in the draft that they wondered if those teams might take him. They did not. He fell to them at 29. They were happy to go get him. There were, like I said, Hairston was another guy they would have liked if Connelly wasn't there. I don't know that it would have been Hairston, but I do know he was on the list. Donovan Ezaraku was there. Mike Green was there. They had interest in both. Now, Mike Green visited here, but sometimes when they visit, it's just to get more information. They have interest, but where that interest went beyond that, I don't know. Clearly, not enough to take him for by any means. And Green had, obviously there were some off-field issues that teams were curious about. But anyways, they did like Hairston, but they took Connelly because they love Connelly. So, and again, Peter said they did have a chance to move back if they wanted to pick more picks, but and they I think they would have considered that strongly had Connelly not been there. This was the guy that they wanted at this spot and that they thought might be there. I think I told you like Tyler Booker was another guy that, I talked to people here who loved the guy. But he was never going to fall that far. So, but was kind of a weird draft because there were teams higher in the draft that could have taken, that could have selected Connelly, but then if they don't, then you're falling all the way to 29. So it's just that's the kind of the range of this draft. It was kind of weird in that regard. But again, I like what they did here. And so there's a couple things too with it, and I'm just kind of looking at my notes with it, but I do think like he can come in and provide immediate help. Like he's going to become a starter at some point, you would expect, right? The 29th pick, first round, that's what you're expecting from him. And especially when you're looking at the line where you need some help. So where is he going to play? That's the first big question. We don't know yet, and they don't know yet. And this will be something they decide in the field. We've told you before that they were going to try Brandon Coleman on the right side, starting off at right tackle. But now that you have another guy who can play that spot, I've always thought that Coleman would be a terrific guard. So would they automatically slide him in there? I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. But now you have options. And I think one thing they love about both those guys is they have versatility. Coleman, we knew could play tackle. We've seen it. He could play right tackle maybe, but he could also play guard. That when he came in the NFL, there were definitely people who felt he'd be a better guard. That very well could be his future home. With Connelly, I know that teams felt like he could be a tackle or a guard, even though he's played pretty much predominantly tackle. And I don't even know if he played guard, but I think he did some in Oregon. I don't know that he played any guard there, but they do feel he can play that in the NFL. So it gives them some options and to see and just throw it out there, have some competition, see what they do. If in the end, Washington ends up with a lineup that has Tunsil and Coleman and Biotish and Cosme when he's back healthy, and then Connelly, now you have Allegretti and Wiley as your backups. That's a pretty damn good front, right? It's good depth. Like you have experienced quality depth, if nothing else. So they have set themselves up to have a strong front. Again, you look at this group, like there's no reason why you can't look at it and say, hey, for the next 4 years, provided everybody stays healthy, this is the group. Like Biotish, now Biotish only signed for a 3-year deal, but if he's doing well, you keep him. So you have Biotish, you have Cosme when he gets back. Let's say Connelly's at right tackle, and you have Coleman at left guard, and you have Tunsil at left tackle. That's an athletic group, and I think that would be something they can run. Those guard tackle pulls. That would be, get a lot of screens. Like this is the offense. This is what fits this offense is the athleticism, but also the versatility. So I think that's a very important thing to look at. And, again, like this is a lot about protecting Jaden Daniels for sure. And just, I know the sexy play is to get the home run hitters. They still could use more of those. Listen, Terry McLaurin had a great year. Deebo Samuel, I think, will help them. Noah Brown back, like they are no worse off than they were last year receiver. And if Deebo Samuel comes and does well, they are better off. So would you like to get another running back in or some other offensive skill player that can provide a little bit more juice? Yes, but the draft isn't over yet. But I would say with this, you have a quarterback who, there are a couple numbers here I'm going to give you. So the sack percentage and the pressure percentage. So the sack percentage for the season was like 6.9, but in like the last 4 games, in 3 of those 4 games, the sack percentage was almost 11%. That's bad. That was not just Jaden Daniels holding on the ball, that was a group that was getting beat up front. And then you look at, and then the pressure percentage went up to like, I think it was like 37.5% in that same stretch, or higher. Um, and then, but for the season, the percentage was like 32.5. That's much more palatable. But you saw that it got worse. In other words, then for the run game, the last 7 games, Washington averaged 1.76 yards. The running backs averaged 1.76 yards before first contact. That's bad. That was like 29th in the NFL during that span. Like, that's why they needed to beef up that front. So just getting this should have the trickle down effect of helping that run game. If it, again, it's got to all work. Like, we've got to see Coleman. Can Coleman play right tackle or left guard? Can Connelly come right in and be a starting right tackle? We don't know all that yet, but I think as the season goes on, Cosme gets back healthy, and let's say in October, then you get this group together. Now you have something that could really kind of generate a lot of momentum with the way the group is playing going into key stretches down near the end of the season, heading into the playoffs. You got to make the playoffs, but that gives you that chance to build a front that could be playing really well toward the end of the season, which is what you want.
BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. Baseball season is in full swing, and we've just started the NBA and NHL playoffs, which has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. With the largest selection of odds on everything from the MLB, NHL, and the UFC, BetOnline remains the number one online source for all your sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and a live casino. Bet online. The game starts here.
Then you look at how does it help Jaden Daniels? Well, obviously the protection angle. But Daniels is the difference here for Daniels and other quarterbacks who can run is that he is a passer who can run. So he wants to be in the pocket, hitting guys down the field. This, on paper, if this all works, gives him a much better chance to do that. So now you have a better chance to hit those big plays. So yeah, it's great you want to get the receivers, but if you don't have the time, if you're not getting it to them, then it can be difficult. So, but this gives you the chance to have that, gives you the chance to have a stronger run game. You got to get another back. But it does all that. There is a trickle down effect if this hits, right? And so I think like that all is very good. And that in turn helps the defense. And it's funny because, one thing Adam Peters said too, speaking of the defense, that he doesn't feel pressure to add a defensive player in the second round. Like you become a better team by drafting the best players you can. And again, I've told you before, what they did in free agency helped set them up to take guys not at areas of need per se, but take the best guy that you want, because you don't have to get the edge. You don't have to get the corner right there, because you do have guys who can play with right now. Where you get yourself in trouble is if you don't have those guys. Now, you may not have elite guys, or the same level. You'd like to get a higher level, but you do have guys you can go out and play and feel like you have a good rotation at those spots. Yes, you'd want to add more, and I do think they'll try to add more. And I'll get to a couple names in a minute here as we get to the second round talk, but sticking on this, I don't think they feel the pressure to do that. The other thing is, I think you have to look at this, look at the rest of the NFC East. I think this is key as well, because you're going to play 6 games against these teams. Look at what the Giants did. They draft Abdul Carter. They have Brian Burns. They have Thibodeau. And they have Tomlinson inside. That's a really good front. You need to combat that front, right? The Eagles, one of the best defensive lines in football, right? Even after losing Sweat, they still are going to have a very good defensive front. You need to beat them as well. Dallas, Micah Parsons, you need to combat him as well. So now you have a group that should be able to handle what you face in the division. Again, on paper, this group looks really good. They've got to go out and do it. I can't emphasize that enough, because paper doesn't mean anything, but I do like the philosophy and the thought behind it. And I do trust their evaluations, because I think, they haven't given a reason to not trust what they do at this point. But I like the idea of building that strong group in front of him. And when you watch, Connolly, I watched games against him, watch him against Ohio State, watch him against Penn State, against Abdul Carter, especially because that's, shoot, he went third overall. This is a guy he's going, could be facing more than a few times in the NFL. So when you watch him, like in the Big Ten championship game, very patient against him, did a really nice job. And what I liked is just, he does a good job. He's not overcommitting early, right? He's waiting. He's reacting to Carter's moves and then winning because of it. So, he shows that foot speed, the athleticism. Now there are sometimes his hands might get a little bit high. So you got to work on that, just some of the technique stuff. And I think he could add a little bit of strength to help himself, especially if you go inside. That's why I think maybe he's probably best outside and sticking out there. But there's so much to like. And when you watch him against Carter, what sold them is you saw him against high level competition. Ohio State has two defensive ends that'll be in the NFL. Michigan has Josiah Stewart, who will be in the NFL. And of course, Penn State with Abdul Carter, the third pick in the draft. So, like, those are the guys that he was going up against. That's how they're measuring him. And then for them, it was what they heard about him in the building at Oregon. It's their kind of guy. And I think that's why I think it's not a sexy pick, but I think you can be excited about what they're building up front. And it's funny because I know there are some people who didn't want to see him take an O lineman. Like, how much can you invest in that? Well, you're investing in Jaden Daniels too. Don't just look at investing in line, investing in Jaden Daniels. And if the best player at that spot had been a receiver on their board, then that's what you take. But and I would say this, it's their board, not yours, not mine, not anybody else's. So it only matters what their board says, not what public perception might be. But Connolly's a guy, like, this is where people thought he would go in this range. I mean, I wondered if he would go maybe early second, if he, late first, early second. But again, tops on your board, that's how you get better. So I do like the pick. Now, second round. 61st pick right now, that's all they have. Could they end up trading that? Yeah, they're obviously, you could trade back in the second round, maybe pick up a fourth round pick, another one, because there are a lot of good. The sweet spot of this draft is, like, when you talk to people second to fourth, I kept saying second to fourth, probably second to the fifth round, that you can find quality players who can help you. And in the second round, the 61st, a guy that I'd love to see there is Femi Oladaju from UCLA. I know everybody, you got a lot of people out there right now saying thank you for pronouncing it right. Anyway, so apologize for butchering that before. But I always knew the name. It just, you messed it up in my head. Anyways, that aside, he's a guy that I would love for them to get. I think he'd be a great chess piece for Dan Quinn for this defense. I think he could really grow and develop. That's why I think he'd be a really good pick. I don't know that he's going to be there. It sounds like he's in that, his floor might be 45 in that range. Maybe he lasts them. I don't know. But there's a number of guys like Carson Schwarzenegger, a linebacker, would give them somebody who can cover down the field in certain packages. I don't know that he'll be there. Travion Henderson's still on the board. Again, I really like him. And I kept telling you, I didn't think they would take a running back in the first round. I wasn't convinced of that. Would they take him in the second round? I'm not so sure. But if he's sitting there at 61 and he's he's tops on your board, that'd be a great pick for them. So, Nick Scorton, the defensive end, I don't know that he lasts that long. Landon Jackson still on the board. He's a guy they like. Could they take him? Would he last to 61? Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, receivers, like, those guys would all be good as well. So for those of you saying, like, yeah, but you got to give Jaden more help. Well, the draft isn't over and it's more than one round. And just because a guy gets in the first, you get a guy in the first round, there are still more picks to go. So there are still ways they can help this team. I think you can still find guys who can come and right in and contribute in these rounds. And so that's why I think, let's see where it goes. But, Caleb Johnson, the running back, he's also there. Noel Williams, cornerback from Cal, also on the board. So Quincy Riley, I think he'd probably be more, maybe mid-round, third round area. I don't know that they would pick him at 61, but again, he would be on the board probably at that time. So there's a lot more choices to go, a lot of options they could have at that pick. I think, it wouldn't be bad, again, if they were able to trade back and pick up another fourth rounder or something like that. So just to give them more options, give them more, lottery tickets in this draft. Regardless, I do think the first pick was good, not sexy, but a good, solid pick. And I think he'll make this team better. I think you should be very excited. my belief is you should be excited about the wall they're building in front of their greatest asset. We've always heard that what do you got to do for a quarterback? You've got to protect him and then give him the weapons. They do have, McLaurin, Debo. Can you add another guy there? I think it would be great if they could, but you're starting to build a really strong wall in front of him, and that's a good place to start. So, anyways, folks, that's it for me. Starting to ramble because it's late. It's about 1:40 in the morning here. So I appreciate you tuning in, and I will be back on what day is it? It'll be after the second, third round Friday night. So the next podcast will be out either late Friday night or early Saturday morning. So I appreciate it. Talk to you next time.